So I finally have all of the components for my first ever PC build. And I thought now would be a good time before I really dive into all the build stuff to kind of talk through what components I picked and why I picked them. Overall, I was sticking to a really budget build, and I know that term gets thrown around a lot. And then it's $1,000 PC or something like that, which can still be a budget build depending on what the value proposition or whatever. But for context, the most powerful PC that I have in my home, or computer that I have in my home currently, is a MacBook Pro from late 2013, Core i7 with 8 gigabytes of RAM and integrated graphics that I bought last year for about $400, which was a good price. I think it served me well, but the integrated graphics thing has become a bit of an issue. You can't game even playing Civ 4, Civ 5 on it or something like that. It really starts to freak out. So I figured it was time to do a build of my own, but I wanted to keep it kind of in that similar price range. I was never going to be able to build something worthwhile for $400, but I have been able to get all of my components at this point for exactly $540, which I think is pretty good overall. I probably could have done a tiny bit better if I really had been a little bit more particular about certain things, but overall pretty good. And frankly, I've used Apple products since I was a kid. I mean, my family always had iMacs, the iMac like G3, and even before that we had the like Centris or whatever, the ones before they had the fancy colors, like the disgusting off-white monitors and everything. But so anyway, this is my first PC build, and the first component that I actually got a hold of is one of the only used components. It's the CPU. So I picked up a Ryzen 5 1600. This is obviously the first gen of the Ryzen series, but a Ryzen 5, and I was able to pick this up on Facebook Marketplace for $60, which I think is a great deal. I know at this point that they've kind of, it's a pretty good value proposition overall to get a new Ryzen chip. Ryzen 5 3600 is like $150 on Amazon right now, which is incredible. But in keeping with kind of, it's still a hugely significant increase over what I've got cooking in my MacBook Pro. So I went with that. It did not come with the stock cooler. And I'm perfectly fine with that. There are plenty of great aftermarket coolers. I ended up going with, much later, going with the Arctic Freezer 33 Esports Edition, which is super well reviewed. It's from a reputable brand. It was only $30 on Amazon, so the price point is really good on it, and I'm sure it'll do a perfectly fine job. I'm not really even planning to do any overclocking at any point, so it's probably unnecessary to have such a a tower cooler like this. And potentially, in retrospect, one thing to consider is the AMD line has 2 levels of stock cooler. In their like Ryzen 7 level, they have the Wraith Prism cooler rather than the Wraith Stealth cooler. I think I'm getting that right. And you can actually find those Prism coolers pretty inexpensively on eBay, never having been used before, because so many people at that Ryzen 7 level are upgrading the coolers anyway. They're happy to dish them out for $25. To be fair, the price point is pretty similar, considering this was $29 brand new, shipped from Amazon. But maybe for like overall aesthetic reasons, I maybe in retrospect might have gone with the AMD Prism cooler, which would have done just fine with my Ryzen 5 1600, considering I'm not overclocking or doing anything crazy like that. So that was kind of the first step that I went with when I was picking out components. The next thing I got was this motherboard, the Prime A320 MK, which is definitely a budget option. I was kind of torn. I know the kind of traditional option is going with like a B450 or something along those lines, something that supports overclocking, but it seemed a little bit ridiculous to spend $60 on the CPU and then like $150 on the motherboard. I was kind of trying to keep, in a nice balance in the budget. So this I was able to find on eBay for $50, which is a great deal, especially considering I thought I was getting like a refurbished product. And when it showed up, it was brand new. Still, everything in the packaging, you know, like all the additional components and stuff in their little compartments and stuff. If it was ever used, I have no idea. Maybe someone pulled it out once. It is in immaculate condition, um, and so it doesn't support overclocking. This board does not support overclocking. I actually need to. I'll need to see later. I'm not sure about the Precision Boost Overdrive. I don't think it does. It's possible. It was tough online finding a clear answer on that. I didn't make my decision based on that in any case. It does have an M.2 slot or drive port, whatever, which was actually important to me because I was very excited about the prospect of having an M.2 NVMe, you know, situation for storage. But we'll get into that later. It has two RAM slots, which is perfectly adequate for my uses. I was only ever planning to have 16 gigabytes of RAM anyway. This is a budget build, so 2 slots is plenty. I don't think there's anything else really about the board. Oh, it doesn't have Wi-Fi. That's an important thing for a lot of people. Not for me. I just got 18 gig fiber, and I'm running a Cat7 cable from my modem router or whatever to my current setup, and it's getting like 990 megabytes down. So I'm going to be going Ethernet all the way, and I'm excited, you know, getting to do that again with this. Yeah, I don't think that there's anything else. 2 PCI Express slots. The nice thing about that is that if you want to stick with M.2 storage, after you've already filled your first M.2 slot, you can use an adapter on the PCI Express slot. But you may know that or may not care about that anyway. So yeah, that's about it. Let's see, next, GPU. This is a really tough decision for someone who's trying to do a budget build because it's going to be expensive pretty much no matter what, relative to the fact that I was able to get a CPU for $60. So I definitely, you know, perused eBay a bunch, and you can find like a decent GPU with like 6 gigabytes of VRAM or something for like, you know, $140 or something like that. But I ended up finding a listing on Facebook Marketplace for a brand new RX 590, the Fat Boy from XFX, with 8 gigabytes of VRAM. I think I said 150. Brand new. His whole story was that like someone bought it as a gift and then he didn't use it and couldn't return it or whatever. I don't care. It's in brand new condition, 150, which is a great price for that card. I know that it's not the most enthusiastically reviewed card on YouTube. Probably just the fatigue of having the 570 and the 580 preceding it, because it's basically, you know, just an overclocked versions of those cards. And XFX does not have a super amazing build quality record. But all of that said, for 150, I think it is going to be just fine for my use case, which is some 1080p gaming. I'm not playing CSGO competitively or trying to do anything else complicated like that. So I think it'll pair perfectly well. I kind of stay in the AMD family for everything. So that worked out for me. RAM. So the A320 board, I didn't mention this before, it natively supports, I think, 2666 megahertz RAM. But if you enable XMP, you can get up to 3200. And again, I was trying to balance, you know, the value proposition of like, do I go to 3200? A lot of people recommend, you know, that with AMD CPUs to have that, you know, speed. I ended up getting the T-Force Vulcan Z 2x8, you know, 16 gigabyte kit, and this is 3000 megahertz, which I think is going to be plenty adequate for what I'm doing. And it was $50, brand new on Amazon. It was on sale by like 10, maybe 10, $15. And it's gray, which I like because I wasn't trying to get, you know, flashy RAM sticks, and low profile, because I'm going to be adding this, you know, freezer cooler, and I have a fairly small form factor board. So all things considered, I'm hoping it'll work out just fine. And $50 is great for getting 3,000 megahertz. For some reason, I really would have been fine with getting used RAM. To be honest with you, people are charging way too much on the used market for RAM. It's like they spent $150 on their 16 gigabyte RAM kit, and they refuse to sell it for less than $100. And it's like people can just buy new stuff for $50. You have to come to terms with that. I couldn't really find anything else on. There was like maybe one listing on Facebook Marketplace that I was kind of interested in, but to save $10 and have to like go meet someone, I would rather just stay at home and order brand new stuff anyway. So yeah, this works fine. Storage was the next question for me, and it's kind of in the vein of like you've only spent like $60 on your CPU, $50 on your motherboard. Why would you go out and spend like $70, $80 on storage unless you absolutely have to? And I really wanted an M.2 drive, so that kind of put me in a tough spot. I was looking at there was a $55 or $60 M.2 on Newegg by WD Black, their SN750 or something like that, and for 256 gigabytes. And I was like, that's a pretty good value. Perfectly fine with that. And as I was about to buy it, I peeked on eBay and I found the SN730, which is a slightly older model, but pretty much identical in many ways. M.2 drive, SSD, Western Digital, black, whatever, for $40. And I think that there is like a laptop wholesaler, and I think what they do is they pull like the slightly smaller drives out, this 256 gigabyte one, and then they put in like a 1 terabyte drive and then upcharge the customer like $200 for it. So anyway, this was $40 and it's brand new. It comes even with a warranty and everything from them. So I'm perfectly pleased with this $40. For that, I'll upgrade additional storage later, either a hard drive or maybe another M.2 with the PCI Express lanes. We'll see. I'm a little tiny bit worried about having the GPU blasting air onto my SSD, but yeah, we'll see about that. Anyway, that's the storage kind of sorted, and power supply. This really was a bit of a pain because I think a lot of people are doing like builds right now or like doing desktop stuff because they're stuck at home or they're people are just demanding more power from their computers at home, and the power supply market seems to have actually gotten more expensive than it used to be. You look at like the Tech Deals YouTube channel, and he reviews this specific power supply unit, which is the EVGA 600B. Like I think it's the B1 model technically, and he's talking about it being like $50 to buy it brand new on Amazon. That is no longer the case. You basically can get a white power supply, white certified power supply, which is pretty much the worst certified power supply you can get in that kind of $50 range. I was able to get this one for $60 refurbished, so it basically is just used. The nice thing with this one is that it does support multiple GPUs, which I'm not going to have multiple GPUs, but the RX 590 does require a 6 and 8 pin connection to power it, which seems like kind of a lot. They actually, and I didn't realize this at the time that I was buying the power supply unit, they actually provide you with a splitter so you can take your 8 pin and turn it into a 6 and 8. I didn't look up like electrically what that means to have that split. I'm sure it's fine since they provide the cable themselves, but I'll probably just be plugging the two directly from the power supply into the GPU. But yeah, actually, in retrospect, I mean, there are some, especially the EVGA power supplies, because I tried to stick with brand names for this, not really going down the stuff that I had never even heard of or that had very few reviews or anything like that, because there's like a gold certified 600 watt power supply from some off-brand on Amazon for like $65 or something like that, which yeah, it probably would have worked out fine. I did read some negative reviews about the fan not really being loud and not properly cooling the power supply, which is always a concern. You know, they've gotten their gold certification, but they cheaped out on some other thing. Um, so sticking with EVGA is probably, or some other, you know, reputable Corsair or something like that, probably a good idea. The tough thing is that they have some good, inexpensive ones I think they have the BQ model or something like that on Amazon that's like, like $60 basically. They're out of stock always. I think it's back in stock like in like 2 weeks or something like that. And unfortunately, I'm impatient and I wanted it now. So I got this used one. It came quickly. I think it'll serve my uses perfectly fine. 600 watts is more than enough. But I did want that kind of multiple GPU thing sorted out, which I probably didn't need to. But anyway, that was my motivation. Personally, if you're doing a build, you're kind of doing the same kind of setup with me, like Ryzen 5 and an RX, graphics card. You could definitely get away with 500 watts, I suspect. The other downside with this one, of course, is that it has the ketchup and mustard and even some purple in there, bunch of different colors in the cables, which is a little unsightly. But you know what? That's just what you have to deal with if you're doing a budget build. I think for the most part, you can't complain too much about aesthetics. Which will transition into the last bit, the case, because I definitely did think about aesthetics a little bit when I went ahead and chose a case. I went with the ever-popular H510 from NZXT, which is a nice mid-tower case. It's white, it's pretty. It's definitely not the most budget option that I could have gone with, considering it was $70. Yeah, it was down. It was like on sale like $10 cheaper than it normally is, but for a long time, I was very strongly considering the Rosewell mesh front case that they have. It comes with like 5 fans pre-installed. It was on sale on Newegg for a long time. Now it's out of stock, unfortunately, which is a big reason why I have this case instead. It also, it's not the prettiest case out there. I probably would have put it under my desk rather than on my desk, which I'm going to put this one on my desk. And I also had a lot of apprehensions about the fan situation in that case. Not so much that the air would move poorly, because hey, the mesh front is definitely the way to go to get some nice circulation going. And I am a tiny bit nervous about, well, I'm not going to be overclocking or anything like that, but the circulation in this case is probably fine with all the fans installed and everything. But the paneling, the inflow is a little weird with that kind of like side bit and the bottom bit basically being the only source of air. But that can, we'll see how that goes. Other people use it all the time with much nicer components than what I'm using, and it seems to work for them. So I think it'll be just fine. But yeah, I had wanted that Rosewell case for a little while because 55 was great coming with fans. But I read a lot of stuff about the it being like Molex connectors and like people trying to figure out how to plug in all the fans and get them working, and RGB control and stuff like that. And my Prime A320MK motherboard over here only has one chassis fan header, so you can only split that responsibly. I would say you could split that into 2, and then you're controlling 2 fans from the motherboard. And then it's a question of like, okay, do you buy a fan controller that plugs directly into the power supply, and then does that keep the fans just running at full speed the whole time, or like what control options are you given by doing that? And I think I just ended up getting mired in that rabbit hole of looking through our Build a PC threads where people are complaining about the case and stuff like that, and I just didn't pull the trigger, and then it was out of stock. So I went with this case. I could have done it cheaper. I could have probably brought myself closer to the $500 range on a build if I use like a DIY PC or something like that. But you want to be excited about your computer build, and maybe that's like the Mac person in me that like wants a pretty electronics or whatever. It's a gorgeous case. It has good cable management and stuff. A nice basement for my kind of extra cables because this is non-modular, obviously. So yeah, that was the kind of decision I had to make there. And then ultimately, for the fan situation, I went with these GIM RGB case fans because the H510 case comes with 2 fans. It comes with the two exhaust fans, but then there are no fans in the front for the intake. They only have the 2 exhaust fans. So I needed to solve 2 problems. I needed to figure out how I was going to control all my fans, and I needed 2 more fans. So the perfect medium was this GIM RGB case fan 3-pack that I bought on Amazon for $30. Yeah, $30. Very reasonable, and it comes with a fan controller that plugs into the power supply via a SATA cable. And the big thing about it is that it has a little like RF remote or whatever that you can control the fan color, but also very importantly, you can control the fan speed, so it's not just stuck spinning at the highest RPM possible and being super loud. So that I'm very pleased with. The only slight downside, and it's not going to be a problem, but I did realize that there are like little fan controller. I can't plug one of my NZXT fans into it because it's like some 5-pin thing, and it doesn't fit properly with like just an ordinary 3-pin. But I'm only going to have one NZXT fan in the case when I'm done setting everything up, and that I will just plug directly into the single chassis fan header that is present on my A320 motherboard. So I think that'll work out just fine. The rest of them will all go into the hub. It has a sync cable that you can plug into the motherboard to kind of sync all your RGB stuff if you've got other stuff. For me, it's just going to be the fans anyway, so I'm not going to mess with that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I forgot. The one thing that occurs to me that I don't know if I mentioned, this A320 motherboard, maybe I mentioned it. I don't think so. It might not. It does support a 2nd gen or 3rd gen Ryzen series, but you might need to update the BIOS, and that would require having a 1st gen Ryzen chip. And fortunately for me, that's actually the Ryzen chip that I bought. So there's no actual issue there for me, but for other people doing a build, it's important to remember that with these budget motherboards and that like 300s class of motherboard, not only are you not going to get overclocking, but you might not automatically have your 2400 or 3600 Ryzen CPU supported straight out of the box. And it would be really unfortunate to realize that after you completed your build. I know it's mentioned on every other build channel, but just doing my due diligence. So other than that, I think I'm going to start putting stuff together. And I suspect, I will, the other thing that was important for me to think about was peripherals, because my current setup is having this 13-inch MacBook Pro, and I have a Thunderbolt display, which I also got a great deal on. Someone was selling it on Facebook Marketplace for $100. I really do not think they knew what they were selling, so I just scooped that up really quick. It served me well. It's nice. It's 1440p. It integrates beautifully, as all Apple products integrate beautifully, with a MacBook Pro with basically the power and the Thunderbolt connector. But when it came time for me to think about peripherals for a PC setup, I cannot use my Thunderbolt display unless I go out and spend a bunch of money on a Thunderbolt EX3 adapter for the board, and then you have to also get the Apple Thunderbolt 3 to 2, and that by itself is like an $80 tiny little adapter. So for a budget build, it doesn't work very well. So I did have to go out and get a monitor and a keyboard and some other little peripheral things. So I'll probably come back with those and discuss why I decided what I decided on for the monitor and everything. But all right, so peripherals. Focus. Okay, so peripherals. First of all, this is the K840 Logitech mechanical wired keyboard. It was like $40 on eBay. Very reasonable for an entry-level keyboard. It doesn't have RGB or anything like that, but it's nice, mechanical keyboard with a Roamer G, whatever. I like it. I have typed on it a little bit. I haven't used it as much because I haven't completely finished the build yet, but I did mess around with it. It is nice. And this is the monitor I went with, which is the Acer VG27OU BM-Pix, whatever. I should know the specific thing, shouldn't I? I'll put it up. It was $200 on eBay, brand new, shipped. I think it's Newegg technically listed on eBay. I just use eBay more because I trust their kind of customer service and everything. But it is a 1440p monitor and 75 hertz, so it does have a slightly higher refresh rate. I really wanted 1440p because that is what my Thunderbolt display has, and I didn't want anything about this build to be worse than what I already have set up. So I had to have 1440p. I was trying to keep it budget, and basically all the 1440p monitors that you're going to get that are inexpensive are going to be 60 hertz, basically. The other nice thing about this one is it's an IPS panel, and it's non-glare, and that's a big step up for me compared to my Thunderbolt monitor, which is glossy. I mean, it looks nice at night, but it is a little bit tough, even in a relatively dark room. If there's a light source from somewhere and you've got like night mode on Reddit or something like that, it's like a mirror. You can see, I can watch my cat walk through the hallway behind me on my monitor, which has been less than ideal, especially if you're trying to do a bunch of reading or something like that, and there are areas of the screen that are super, reflective. I'm happy to be able to have an anti-glare screen. Okay, sorry about that. My camera didn't want to focus for some reason. Maybe the screen is giving it problems, but I have been able to check out the monitor using my laptop to connect via HDMI. I don't think I was getting that full 75 hertz experience because I think HDMI 2.0, which is what I would have been using, only supports a refresh rate of 60 hertz. So I was capped at that, and it still looks good. It looks sharp. I have one stuck pixel somewhere. It's sort of central. I thought briefly about returning it. I know Newegg has some policies and I've technically bought it through eBay, but it's a Newegg via eBay thing, so I might have not been able to return it because I know Newegg is a little bit weird about dead pixels or stuck pixels. The other good thing with a stuck pixel is that you probably can fix it. I did run the crazy, super. There are YouTube videos that you can pull up that have all the colors that are flashing really quickly that can help fix a stuck pixel. I ran that for a little while. It didn't fix it. I think you're supposed to run it for an hour, and I ran it for 10 minutes before I was bored and was like, whatever. It's not super noticeable. It's green or something stuck on green, and it's kind of in the middle of the screen. The only time I notice it is if I have a black screen, basically. So I didn't even notice it the first probably 2 hours or 3 hours that I was using the computer or the monitor. So I'll probably address that later. That's the only kind of deficiency that I've encountered with this thus far, but otherwise I think it's a good value. Some of the reviews are really negative about the stand. I really don't get it. I mean, it's fine. It's not, super crazy durable. You can't turn it sideways, but you can adjust the tilt a little bit, which is really, that's nice depending on how slouched you're sitting, if you want to have it whatever. So I think for $200, getting a new monitor, 75 hertz, 1440p, it has built-in speakers, which they're terrible. That is actually possibly the one thing that'll be worse about this build than my current setup, because the Thunderbolt display has fantastic built-in sound. It even has a built-in subwoofer. So most of the time that I'm watching YouTube videos, I'll just use the built-in sound. Even though I have nice headphones and a DAC and all this stuff for listening to music, for certain things it doesn't really matter. And those speakers are fantastic on the that's kind of an Apple thing, to have the user experience be dealt with, so you don't have to add speakers or whatever. But these actually do have built-in speakers, so in certain cases of maybe watching YouTube videos or something like that, where you don't need to be wearing headphones necessarily, these will work passably fine. So yeah, I think that's about probably it for peripherals. Yeah, so I guess I have no more excuses to just put things together. So time to do that. Alright, so the build portion is complete. Went pretty well overall, I would say, especially for a first build. I don't think there was any like super rookie mistakes, but first things first, the motherboard did not come with an I/O shield or an M.2 screw, which was a little bit annoying. I know I said it was in like new condition with you know, all of the accessories. It did not have all the accessories. I was wrong. So I'll have to order an I/O shield. It's not super important. I actually already ordered it. It should be here in a couple weeks. Unfortunately, it's going to take a while, but it is important for dust reasons and potentially for electrical grounding reasons as well. And it's going to be annoying because once it gets here, I'll have to like pull the whole motherboard, like the GPU and everything out in order to just put in the I/O shield, which is a bit of an annoyance. The M.2 screw, I got a little bit lucky because I had a screw from like replacing a battery and something, some tiny like iPhone screw or something like that, which actually fit. So it's holding the M.2 drive in place, so that's nice. As far as the actual build in the case, I like the case. It's nice. I didn't use as much of the cable routing stuff as I thought I would. It was a little bit helpful, but overall the really nice thing is how much space you have in the basement here, and I actually accentuated that a little bit because there's a 3.5-inch drive bay that sits right about here in the case. I don't have any 3.5-inch drives that I'm putting in, so I just pulled it out. If I'm going to add additional drives, it'll probably be the 2.5-inch drives, and those are in the back of the case. Right behind the motherboard here, and you can actually remove them and put them in the front in this area down here. So yeah, that's probably what I'll do when I add storage to this. I had mentioned using the PCI Express lanes for M.2 storage. With the fat boy in here, there's absolutely no room for anything going into those PCI Express slots. So that's just not going to happen, which is fine, but yeah, let's see, what else? Oh, so I did make one very rookie mistake, and it has to do with this case specifically. The front, I gotta grab a screwdriver. The thumb screws are not really thumb screws. You kind of have to use a screwdriver. Once to get them started, at least once it's started, it works okay, I guess. But so let's maybe zoom in a little bit here. So those fans, as you can see, I actually had installed them. There's this tray here that you have to pull out because the front panel itself doesn't come off. And then you install the fans onto the tray. I actually installed them on the other side of the tray because with lots of cases that you see, this like front area in here is where the fans are, and that's usually because the intake is actually on the front. So my instincts were, oh, you know, put them in that kind of space between the, you know, here and the front panel. And then I was looking at it, I was like, you know, later I was trying to route all my cables on the backside, and I was like, wow, there's not a whole lot of airflow in there if you have the fans on this side. Maybe I should move them to the other side. And I was like, wait a minute, that might be what they actually want you to do. So I went back and looked at some builds, and I guess I hadn't been paying close enough attention because they're definitely supposed to be on the back like this. So I had to switch my whole fan arrangement, and I have both of my RGB fans here, and then the other RGB fan back here, and my NZXT fan, the one that I'm keeping is up here, which actually works great because the chassis fan header is way back here, and I was originally routing it like all the way around, and it was kind of long for the cable, but yeah, I think that about does it for the front. And the CPU cooler, the Arctic Freezer 33, I was a little nervous about that step because it is kind of like, you know, you don't want to use too much thermal compound. You want to make sure it's, you know, tight but not too tight, and like how the hell are you supposed to know what that means? But I think I got it on all right. It was a little bit tough at first. I would get like 3 of the screws to be, you know, going down easily, and then the 4th one would just refuse. So I had to like loosen them all again and start over. And it would be like a different screw each time. But eventually I got them all going on. I do think the last note on the front, this board is pretty small. I think it's a MATX form factor. It seems, I mean, this is a mid tower, so it's kind of intended for that, although it can fit an ATX board. It does seem a little compact. Maybe that's just because of how big the tower cooler is, and then, you know, the large graphics card. It's not filling out a whole bunch of the case. I don't know if you can see that super easily. You can zoom back in a little bit. There's a decent amount of space in the front and bottom, which should, you know, help with cooling, I suspect. But it doesn't quite fill out the space as much. I'll have to like find some, you know, like Star Wars toys or something to put in the bottom here, like everyone else does. And it should help with the cooling for the power supply, I guess, to have more airflow around there. But let's flip it around and. The cable management looks really good from, you know, my perspective. And it doesn't even need to be that pretty on the back, frankly, because nobody's going to see it anyway. But as you can see, I've got the fan controller up here, which is actually on the like 510i, I believe, and the H710 or the Elite versions they have. It comes with an NZXT fan controller up there, so it provides a nice space. This also lights up. But I couldn't figure out a way to get it on the other side of the case where it would, you know, you could get the advantage of having an additional, like, cool light source and not have the aesthetically unpleasing cables that all have to be plugged into it. So I just put it back here. Maybe it'll bounce off the white back plate a little bit and get some light in there, but can't really worry about that. Otherwise, yeah, I pulled the HDD drive bay out here. So that kind of gives me more room in the basement for the extra cables because I don't have a modular power supply, so all the spaghetti can hang out down there. These are the 2.5-inch drive bays. You can leave them back here and add an SSD. Otherwise, maybe I should do it. Well, I'll worry about that later. I'll probably pull one of them around to the front because I have so much room at the bottom of the case that I can add an SSD there eventually. With some SATA drives. There's a nice little, you know, gaps down here to get cables. This is my front panel and USB 3 cables. I didn't even bother plugging anything else from the front panel in. I'm not going to attach headphones to the headphone jack at the top. Headphone/mic jack. CPU, and I do have a little bit of cable routing here. I couldn't fit my, you know, the motherboard power into the routing that it kind of tries to take you on, but whatever. And I actually have room for airflow thanks to moving the fans where they're supposed to be. But other than that, just you know, time to set it up and see how it looks. See if it boots. This is my current setup in all its glory. You can see the, like, you know, all the Apple stuff. Nice. Pretty. So, final updates now on the system. I've had it running for maybe 2 days or so now. It's doing really well. I've done a little bit of light gaming. I played Civ 6 on it for maybe an hour. You lose track of time when you're playing Civ. For a while, it did really well. I was able to do all high settings. I know that's not like an intensive game, but for me, it was a nice experience to play that game without having to sacrifice like the shadow details or other weird stuff like that. I have been paying attention to the sensors. I was a little bit worried about the cooler because I didn't tighten down the CPU tower cooler, that Arctic Freezer 33. I didn't tighten it down super far. The way that the screws are, they're only threaded about like a third of the bottom of the screw has threading on it, which makes sense because it's like offset pretty far to get to the bracket. But the temptation is to kind of tighten it down so that you don't really see the threading anymore. It kind of feels like that would be the natural point at which to stop, but it was getting pretty tight, so I left it. I didn't want to overdo it. I'd rather have to go back and just like tighten it up a little bit than damage the CPU, obviously. But right now, I think I've been keeping it. Where are my numbers? CPU 31.1. I'm happy with that. That's incredible for keeping the temperatures down. 31.010. That's really low for idle. I really like that. It makes me feel good. To see it that low, even when I played Civ for like an hour or whatever, it got up to like maybe like 45 or 50. It was pretty low still, so that's great. Don't tighten it down too much. You can still see quite a bit of thread on the screw when you've tightened it down, and it's still good. And then I also did a crystal disk mark test on the on my M.2 drive, that SN730 from Western Digital. I got 2,885.68 megabytes read speed and 2175 megabytes write speed, which is pretty quick, especially relative to like a SATA drive or something like that. So the fact that I'm not like pushing the 3,000, 3,400 write speeds or read speeds, that doesn't bother me that much because the comparison is 600 megabytes from a SATA drive. So very happy with that as well. It boots really fast. I mean, I sleep it most of the time now, just so that I can like click, smash the keyboard to turn it on. But for a while, I was turning it off and turning it back on, and it is so fast. It's very comparable to just sleep and wake functionality. So that's really nice as well. Of course, that's the advantage of having an M.2 drive in there, is that it loads and boots quickly. The other thing that freaked me out quite a bit, I was following Paul's Hardware's channel, like video on installing Windows, because obviously that's the other hoop you have to jump through to get everything running. And after I'd gotten everything set up, he was saying like, oh, you should go to the motherboard manufacturer's website and check for updated like drivers and software and stuff for the motherboard. And I downloaded the VGA, so like the GPU software that they had on the Asus site for this A320MK, and it wouldn't recognize my GPU. It said that there was incompatible hardware or something like that. Freaked me out a lot because I thought, wow, I really dropped the ball. I maybe got like a GPU that isn't compatible with this motherboard. Like, that would be a big oversight. And especially, spending the money, the largest section of my budget was basically on the GPU, so I definitely should have made 100% sure. But as I was trying to figure it out, I was like, you know what, I'm going to go to AMD and download their specific software and driver for this, looked up the RX 590 rather than looking up the A320MK for driver information. And when I downloaded all the, software and stuff from AMD directly, it recognized everything immediately. And it's AMD software, as far as I don't even know what the distinction is between the two softwares that I downloaded. I just think it's the newer software or something. I honestly don't know. Maybe Asus has dropped the ball on including the most recent drivers for some of their, or the most recent software for some of their really old motherboards. I don't know what it was, but it immediately worked and recognized everything, and it's been working really well ever since. So my recommendation would be, for your GPU, just go to AMD or NVIDIA or whatever and get it directly from them, especially if you're using a budget board. It's possible that some of the stuff on their website is out of date, or something weird is going on. So that worked for me. I don't know what the hell was going on there. The final piece of the puzzle, well, actually I did this before, but as far as discussing it, is that getting the Windows 10 key. I know like $15 to buy a key online somewhere is very reasonable compared to the whatever $128 that they charge on Amazon. But I didn't want to pay at all because I'm a student, and I know frequently students are given access to software for free. So I wanted to leverage that as much as possible, and just get a basic version of Windows 10. And initially I went to the software store for my institution because that seemed like kind of a good place to start. I've gotten software from there before, but they didn't have anything. They didn't have Windows 10 listed as anything there. So I ended up going through the Windows. What's it called? It's still up. Yeah, the Reserve Microsoft Azure for Education. And I signed in there, and then they have a bunch of software listed. Really right. They have a bunch of software listed, and then when you click the get access or whatever, it gave me a key for Windows 10 education, like an education version of Windows 10 or something like that. It runs perfectly fine. I haven't even I'm not a Windows person. I have used it for work in the past, but it serves my need perfectly well. And it was $15, so I can't complain about that. So yeah, I just used another Windows laptop to create a media creation tool or whatever version. I booted from that, and then when it prompted me to enter the key, I could just enter that key without having to do anything else, and it just set up on its own, which was nice because I didn't even really know what version I would select. It was like the education version, and I don't know that they even list that in your options when you're selecting like version, which is one of the important things because if you click I don't have a key and then select like Windows 10 Pro, and then the key that you supply later isn't a Pro key, then you might run into problems, and you might have to like do a wipe and a fresh install, which is just a pain. So honestly, I would say get the key first, put that in when it's prompted, and it'll handle everything. That's probably the easiest way to do it, I suspect, rather than what I've seen in multiple YouTube videos is like, oh, click I don't have a key, and then just deal with that later. Which is fine as long as you're 100% certain that you're going to get a Pro key or something, you know exactly what you're going to do. And I didn't, because I was just going to go with whatever was cheapest, whatever was freest. So, yeah, that's what I did. But anyway, overall, really happy with the build. I'm going to put it through some more paces as far as a little bit more gaming. And yeah, I'm really satisfied with the build. It looks great. The screen looks great. The build looks great. You can tell my favorite color is green. So yeah, hopefully this is helpful to anyone else that's doing a similar build. I know I had a bunch of questions that weren't really answered when I was looking around on YouTube, so maybe this serves that purpose for other people. Anyway, thanks.